Warzone, I want to keep saying 3, but it's not technically branded as such, but Warzone's Season 1 integration with Modern Warfare 3 now includes all those Modern Warfare 3 mechanics, gear sets, perks, and most importantly, perhaps, weaponry. So 37 more weapons to your arsenal and a new world to explore. What weapons should you be using now after the integration and the update? Today, we're diving into my top picks for the best weapons and loadouts that you should be using in Warzone Season 1 here after marathoning the game since the launch of the season. Drop your thoughts down below as we go along. Drop a like if you enjoy and subscribe if you're new to the channel for more loadouts, tips, guides, news, information, all that on Warzone and Modern Warfare 3. With 60% of viewers not subscribed, I'd love to have you in the community if you'd like to join. And finally, check out my friends over at G Fuel for 30% off your entire order with code ESPRESSO to fuel your COD grind in Modern Warfare 3 and Warzone, or for some killer stocking stuffers this year. Anyways, let's jump into it. Firstly, a sort of little disclaimer, this is my baseline. While I played a ton since the launch already of Warzone and Season 1 and have found that these builds work for me, maybe they're not exactly your cup of tea. Maybe my goals in terms of what I want to prioritize a weapon for doesn't exactly match yours, to which totally fine, but build off that. If my logic and reasoning for what I use for my builds doesn't fit your playstyle, feel free to tweak them. Secondly, the meta is ever evolving, balance passes, shifts in focus for goals of builds, it's ever changing. So maybe come mid-season, I'll have a different list that looks drastically different. But for now, this is what I'd recommend jumping in with. Firstly, my top and favorite picks here kind of all over the board in regards to distances and meta before breaking into the long, medium, and close range metas. Firstly, my favorites, I want to start with the BAS-B. That's probably one that is pretty self-explanatory. If you've played Warzone, you've probably seen this already. This is the go-to for me right now. In my mind, it's insanely easy to use. It has recoil, so you're going to want to mitigate that as much as possible. And it very well may be one of those sort of mouse and keyboard favorite weapons because it's weight user control there, but even still, this thing shreds even on controllers. Close quarters, medium to long range, you'll get it done. Doesn't matter the situation, really. My big concern for the weapon pre-Warzone launch was the lack of ammunition. 300 HP and only 45 rounds to work with wasn't a whole ton, but you can take out 3 enemies in a single mag the way this thing breaks down if you're accurate. For this, I'd recommend the Pulemyot Eagle's Eye 2.5 times optic, the Bruin Venom long barrel, the VT7 Spitfire suppressor, the Ravage 20 heavy stock, and the 45 round magazine. Now for this build, you're prioritizing control and bullet velocity. You sacrifice a bit in the movement speed and other mobility attributes, but with the properties that it affords in the damage and TTK, you're looking at a weapon that is sub 600 TTK, outwards of 35 meters. That's not long range meta, but it's long enough range meta that it is an insane TTK by comparison to a lot of the stuff you'll use for most engagements. The next best TTK is the DG58 burst, which can hold just under a 700 millisecond TTK out to that same 35-ish meters. But again, you're getting just that much faster with something that is strange because on paper, a 666 RPM fire rate doesn't seem too prominent, but man, that thing just packs a punch. Now next, we talked about the DG58, so may as well jump into it. The burst meta is back for now. I don't know how long this will live on. Maybe it is something that lives the entire year. Maybe it lasts just until Season 1 reloaded in the next weapon balancing pass, but it is something that's absolutely there. And while there are other options that maybe are either viable or perhaps even outclass it in some instances, I'd be lying if I said the DG58 burst wasn't one of the best weapons right now to use in Warzone. It just absolutely melts players if you're accurate. Honestly, I don't think this is much of a surprise right now. The DG58 is an absolute machine in MP, and while sometimes we get those oddball weapons that don't perform nearly as well as they do in MP, this is not one of those cases. You want to kit it out for recoil mitigation because that's basically the only thing that will really hinder this weapon. Another good factor to have is gun kit control for flinch, but this thing can shred. But for this build, I'd recommend the Pulemyot Eagle's Eye 2.5 times optic, the DG56 LS18 barrel, the VT7 Spitfire suppressor, the 60 round mag, or you can get away with the 40 round mag if you want a bit more mobility and a little faster ADS speed with that. Kind of a nominal difference here with this because you're down to straight up milliseconds in terms of differences, but also offering you enough for like 5 more bursts if you were to take another engagement. Like your ADS speed only changes by 17 milliseconds, your sprint to fire speed only changes by 2 milliseconds, and the magazine reload again is only a fourth of a second for regular reload and a 10th of a second for the empty reload. So realistically, again, you're not losing a whole ton, but if you want that little bit faster in terms of mobility, the 40 round might be the better option. But then I'd run the Soldier Pro padded buttstock as the final attachment here with this. That last bit on the stock, that one felt a bit odd to neglect an underbarrel, but when you compare the best option of the Bruin Heavy to the buttstock, the stock wins in the head-to-head for recoil control and mitigation. So would highly recommend that, but whenever you end up kitting this thing out, it is one that barely moves. And again, you end up having that ability to just absolutely fry through enemies if you are accurate. That's the big part here. You want to make sure you're accurate, of course, but try it out, you won't be disappointed. Next, the DG58 LSW. The same family, but the LMG category right now is probably the most versatile and most deadly of weapon classes after the integration. Right now, there really isn't a bad LMG. Some I do like more than others, some statistically better than others, but truly, if you pick up an LMG, you can do well with it. I do hate that, honestly, I can't put them all in here. I mean, I could, but also it wouldn't be super fair to anyone not wanting to use an LMG. So while we'll make mental note of it, we'll come back to it later on in the video. Not every LMG will have a build here at this one, but the DG58 LSW, it's one that's just, it's incredibly easy to control. It's a very simple weapon to use. It's kind of like the jack of all trades LMG, I'd say. There are trade-offs, but not nearly as many as the other LMGs, I'd say at least. And it's honestly just been a ton of fun to play around with. Now for this one, I'd recommend that 2.5 times optic, the DG Emperor Heavy Barrel, the Spitfire Suppressor. You don't necessarily need a magazine. It comes with 60 base rounds, so that's totally fine with me. I don't think you need that 100-round drum mag, though if you want it, you can put it on. I'd end up also recommending the Steady Grip, which oddly enough beats out the best option of the Bruin that you can usually see in that underbarrel, that Bruin Heavy Grip. So that offers a bit more in regards to that vertical recoil. And then the recoil reduction butt plate. That is something that I'd highly recommend that build for control. And again, at a distance, you'll be able to see that control in action. It's honestly a really good build, I think, and I'd highly recommend checking it out. Next, the Rival 9. This has been my close range favorite. I'm sure there are others, and honestly, I'd say the Swarm just in sheer TTK outranks it, but the versatility of this one is why I like it so much. The thing with this though, it will shred up close, but once you get to like the 10-meter range, that's where it drops off like a cliffside. We talked about this pre-launch of Season 1, and I figured this would be the case with a few of the SMGs, comparing them to the Cold War MP5, something that was truly remarkable in terms of fast TTK, but only to a point. Once you get to that point, it kind of sucked. And that's how a lot of the close range meta is right now, but the Rival 9, I feel like pushed it to the point of it sucks the least when you get to that cliffside and range. But that's not to say that it's not just absurdly good, because it is. I mean, it is one of those weapons you have to realize it's a close range weapon and use it as such. If you try and extend it out to anything that is almost rivaling that of 15 or 20 meters where you start to get into that rifle range, you're going to find not so much success. I found myself trying to pull off some of those Lockman sub or ISO plays that I could do last year in Al Mazrah, but it doesn't work this time around. So you have to keep that in mind. For this build, I'd recommend the Rival C Clear Shot Barrel for bullet velo, damage range, and recoil control. The hollow point rounds for crippling power. This is one that I'd probably sacrifice if I want to make any adjustments, but even though this was nerfed on paper, the flinch effect still exists, it seems like. So it seems like for the time being, I do still find this useful, but then beyond that, I run the 50-round mag, the Rival Vice Grip, and the Flash V4 stock. Again, all in all, I had a blast with this thing so far within the first day or two here that we're playing and running this. It's been my go-to SMG. Again, there are some weapons that do maybe outclass it in just sheer TTK values, but it's just an overall versatile weapon, I think, in that SMG category. And for that, that's why I like this one. Now, next, let's move on over into the medium range here at this. We're going to talk about two more LMGs. Again, we talked about it. The LMGs right now are just insanely good, but the TAC Eradicator. In theory, the Eradicator beats out the DG58 LSW and other LMGs by a solid margin when it comes to that TTK, but it's all theoretical. The thing with the Eradicator is that just like the SVA, it has a higher rate of fire for the first few bullets. So in theory, you're landing all those shots, hitting everything perfectly, you're getting more lethal damage way faster, leading to the fastest theoretical TTK in the LMG category. But that's cool and all, but there's a cooldown after those first few shots in rate of fire, and then you start to introduce a lot more recoil both vertically and horizontally. So in theory, it reigns supreme, but in practice, not as much, though it's still on that list of weapons that I would absolutely recommend. Obviously, we're talking about it. So you really want to make sure you're mitigating the recoil where possible, and the gun kick with this. So for this build, I'd recommend the Eagle's Eye 2.5 times optic. As you can see, that's kind of the go-to optic I love for the medium range meta here with this, rifles, LMGs, all that kind of stuff. Then I'd recommend the Conquer 70 long barrel, the VT7 Spitfire suppressor, the Bruin heavy support grip, or the Kimura Rin 3 vertical grip. So which of those do you choose? That's where it gets kind of subjective. If you can control horizontal recoil, the Kimura clears. offering 10% more and that recoil control vertically. But if you prefer to manually control the vertical recoil, which I suspect most do if you're on controller, you just have to pull your thumbstick down, then it's flipped. The Bruin offers the 14% in that horizontal recoil control mitigation category, so for many, the Bruin will probably be the right option. And finally, the core stock for added kick and recoil control. Again, this is one that at mid-range has a lot of theoretical potential for this, but in practice, it really comes down to how you can control the weapon. But I promise you'll be able to do well with it. Beyond that, the second and final weapon we'll talk about in medium range exclusive is the PKM. This is mobile, powerful, and it's one that honestly is a lot of fun to use. I've seen people kit this out more sort of traditionally where you have it as a true LMG class, but I was running around with the Jack Annihilator bullpup conversion and having a lot of fun with it. And that's again where this kind of comes down to use this as a baseline. If you don't like this build, maybe just take into consideration that statistically it's one that will do well for you and adjust it where applicable. But for the Jack Annihilator bullpup conversion, it maxes out mobility, the rate of fire, and the aim down sight speeds among others, and allows this thing to have a bit more aggressive playstyle in my opinion. But then I kit it with the 2.5 times optic, the Jack Annihilator long barrel for bullet velo and range, the Spitfire suppressor for recoil control, and the Bruin heavy support grip for horizontal recoil control, which makes this stupidly easy to control at range. So honestly, try that one out. Again, a lot of fun, whether you want to play with it as the bullpup conversion or a traditional LMG, it's up to you, but it'll do well for you. The close range, now talking about that, I want to touch on two weapons for this. The WSP Swarm, again, as we talked about, statistically speaking, is a much faster TTK than that of the rival that we talked about. But again, it's one of those things that's very, very situational. It's great in close quarters, but you get to even a slight distance and it's just something that it's hard to control, not only because it's expending so much ammunition per second, but also because the damage fall off is just ever present. For this, I'd recommend the Bruin Cubic Comp Muzzle, the Bruin Heavy Support Underbarrel, the 50-round mag. You can do the 100-round mag, but I just kind of think that's overkill. The Marauder Grip and the FSS Fortress Heavy Stock. You want to maximize the recoil control, but again, do note this is still going to drop off at a distance, so use it to shred through players up close, but only for that. Then, the Striker is one that's been kind of the wild card that I'm not entirely sure I've quite figured out yet personally. I like the feel of it, but also I feel like it's outclassed by other SMGs. It's a slower rate of fire, but better damage. Still a wild drop-off, so I'm not sure if I should be kitting this thing fully for mobility and sprint to fire and ADS, or more so for control. It's kind of eluded me through the first dozen hours of play or so that I've had with it, and I can't quite get what I want to do with it down. Maybe you guys know more specifically what you want for it, but again, I feel like it's kind of teetering on the edge there. For me, I'd recommend the Striker Elite Long Barrel, the Bruin Heavy Support Grip, the hollow point rounds, again, probably the most expendable part of this build, in which case I'd throw on the Tac Grip Rear Grip for sprint to fire speeds if you don't want to use that, the 60-round mag, and the Lockman MK2 Light Stock for movement speed. And that is going to conclude our favorites as well as the medium to close range metas. So let's talk about the long range meta, because I'm absolutely going to be doing it here at this. I didn't the entire past year within Al Mazrah, but the sniping meta, there's gonna be one this year. The KATT AMR is absolutely what I'd recommend. It's not the only sniper to one-shot, but the only one that will do so without any crutch attachments. Like, you can still one-shot headshot somebody with the FJX Imperium and the MCPR 300, but you need to equip the explosive ammunition. On the KATT, you don't need to do that. For this, I'd recommend, again, really just making sure you have bullet velocity as your big main selling point. And for that, I'd recommend running the Zang 34 barrel, the XRK Nightfall suppressor, the 50 cal Spire Point rounds, the Phantom Grip, and the tactical stock pad. The KATT at base is really bad at ADS and sprint to fire, so if you can maximize that where possible, give it a fighting chance for that in a little terms of quickness, you absolutely can, but the biggest thing you want is that bullet velocity where possible. That is, I think, the most important part of this build. And with this, you're sitting at just under a 1300 meter per second bullet velocity, which is great for any sniper in this game. The ADS and all that kind of stuff can come secondary, because for a lot of engagements, if you're playing long range, you're probably not going to need to quickscope somebody. Although it's nice, you might not necessarily need to, but that's also why we have a support weapon that can do the dirty work in close coming up here. Number 10 and the final weapon build that I want to talk about is the MTZ-556, one that otherwise I don't really think stands on its own as a top 10 weapon, but it's a great support support weapon. I use this support for the rate of fire and the control that it offers. Yes, you can absolutely build something like a pocket BAS-B perhaps, but I like the MTZ-556 where applicable again for that fire rate. You want to prioritize control, but also bullet velo, and if you can, put in a couple of quick gun up attributes like the sprint to fire and ADS, that's just added bonus. But for this, I'd recommend the MTZ Clinch Pro Barrel, the Bruin Heavy Support Grip, the 5.56 NATO High Grain Rounds, the 50 round drum mag, and the Bruin TR-24 Assault Grip, and that I think is just a great support build you should try out. Now, that's my top 10 weapons right now within Warzone and the first couple of days here within Season 1. Again, it is subject to change. It's definitely something that very well could come a week later be like, okay, I like this better, and it is something that statistically may be better. But as of right now, based off of feels, based off preliminary testing and statistics available, these are what I'd recommend. But also, as I said before, the nice part is that right now with the meta, there's no real true must-use weapon or must-use set of weapons. There's still plenty of weapons that I think are just on the cusp and that I hate to not include in this. Like the Bruin, for one, is a tank. Statistically, again, it has a very fast TTK. It is something that's very good to use. I just think that other LMGs outclass it ever so slightly right now, but like it'd be a 10.5 ranking or something. Another one that easily can make it is the Ram 7. It could probably even be interchangeable with that MTZ 556. The MCW isn't bad by any stretch of the imagination either. So there are weapons you can use in place of others, but again, it's up to what you want to try out, but that is what I'd recommend. So that is what we're going to call it. Before we wrap everything up, again, make sure to check out my friends over at G Fuel, code Espresso, get you 30% off your entire order for either fueling your COD grind this season in Warzone, Modern Warfare 3, or maybe you just want to get some cool stocking stuffers. But whatever the case, G Fuel is like my cup of coffee in the morning. Highly recommend it. I usually end up drinking the Morbius Nectarine flavor, Hype Sauce, Pink Trip, Strawberry Banana, my Team of Carnage, our flavor of Pog Juice. Love all those. So if you guys want to try those out or more, link is in the description below. And if you guys want to use code Espresso to get you 30% off your entire order. But for now, that's what we're going to call it. So thanks so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts down below. If you enjoyed the video, drop a like, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you guys in the next one. But for now, take care and peace.